Welcome back. All right, so this year in the Stanley Cup playoffs, the Vegas Golden Knights run through. They end up winning themselves a Stanley Cup title, and immediately I see the comments on LTIR. Well, LTIR. I mean, Stone wasn't really hurt. Yeah, Stone's back wasn't hurt. That's why all the teams were cross-checking him in the back because they knew his back was his strongest point. So the reality is that yes, the Vegas Golden Knights have a team that was above the salary cap. Yes, were they the only team? No. And honestly, this is something that I've talked about with the National Hockey League before. I talked about it during the season, right? Long-term injured reserve and how teams, most of the league seem to be using it to get themselves under the cap. And it is something that's frustrating to fans, but I would imagine for general managers, the flat cap is frustrating too. You have basically contracts keep going up because guys want more money and GMs will give them more money, but they don't have the salary cap space for that higher paid contract. It's something that will change next summer. I would think that a lot of the things on the board here today will start to go away next summer because teams are going to have way more cap space. So for everybody who's complaining right now about how cheap the NHL is and how ridiculously, and they're so cheap, next summer, the expectation I have is people complaining the salary cap's way too high because it'll be up in the 90 million range potentially, and that players are just getting greedy. So it'll shift. It shifts from players, owners, whoever. Everybody's greedy. So for LTIR to qualify, a player has to miss 10 games and 24 days. So if a player misses 10 games in 20 days, he can't come back in day 21. He can't come back until those 24 days have passed. So that is a team saying we're going to take this player out of our lineup for 10 games. And that's not a minor amount of games. That is a lot of games. That is an eighth of your schedule. That's 12% of your schedule, right? So losing a player for that long is a big deal. And when it's a star player, it's also a big deal. So I'm wearing Tampa because, of course, Tampa's kind of the original. They're the OGs with this. But it has become a league-wide thing. So LTIR allows a team to exceed the salary cap, which breaks media and fans everywhere. Not me, because I see everything that's going on and I get it. And I'll get into all the other things as well. But more than half of the NHL at some point this year used the salary cap's LTIR to get themselves below the salary cap in the National Hockey League. And there was one point where it was exactly half the league, where at one time 16 teams were using LTIR. And there were, I want to say almost all of them would have been over the cap without it. We are in a situation where GMs have spent themselves into this dilemma. So how do you get out of that dilemma if you're not necessarily on LTIR? And again, players play through injury. So there are definitely players who have played in this past season who, if they sat down with a doctor and revealed a knee problem, a shoulder problem, a back problem, whatever it is, that a doctor would say, you shouldn't be playing on that. Why are you playing with that injury? And the player's answer would be, I got to play. If I could skate, I got to play. My team needs me. And we saw that in the playoffs, and there's definitely that consideration of these players shouldn't be playing because they're hurt, but they want to play, and they feel like they're good to go, and a team will allow them to play because very often it's the replacement for that player at 100% isn't as good as they are at 70%. So that's just basically a team saying we have to have this guy in the lineup if he feels like he's good to go. So the player gets that say. And I do think there's a lot of players who will play through a ton of pain, as we're seeing again with these playoffs. Ekblad and all of his problems. Tkachuk trying to play with a broken sternum. So could that qualify for LTIR? Yeah. Does LTIR go away in the playoffs? Yeah. The reason that the LTIR and the salary cap goes away in the playoffs is because players are done being paid. So players are no longer being paid. Their last paycheck is during the regular season. It's at the end of the regular season. I think it's like 2 weeks from the regular season's finish. And then they're done being paid. So with the National Hockey League, the playoffs, they're paid from a pool of money, but it's nowhere near the amount of money they get for the regular season. So, yeah, LTIR is this muddled mess. I expect it to stay that way. But there's other ways teams got around the cap, too. And I find it funny because there are a lot of teams that did this. So your team needs a player. That player's cap hit is $7 million. Your team has $6 million in cap space. How do you make it work? You call up a third team. So let's say it's Tampa. Let's say it's Vegas. They're trying to make a deal. And Tampa's trying to pick up a player. It'll mean a $7 million extra cap hit. They've got to get that $1 million out of there. They call up Bill Guerin in the Minnesota Wild. Bill's like, hey, guys, what's up? all right, I will take $1 million of that cap hit. You guys send me a third or a fourth round draft pick. We're good. And so they get a draft pick to take on $1 million. Your team now picks up that player. That player shows, as having a $6 million cap hit on your cap. But $1 million of that's parked with another team. And it's weird. Just imagine if on July 1st, the New York Rangers say, we have signed Luke Schenn. We've signed Luke Schenn to 2 years for $2.5 million. But we don't feel like we have enough room to justify the $2.5 million. So we traded $1 million of that cap hit to the Arizona Coyotes for a 5th round draft pick. So it'll only count as $1 million. This is where it gets kind of weird, right? So we don't say anything during the season when this happens, but it's still teams getting around the cap. It's the same thing. And I would expect these three-way deals won't completely go away when the salary cap starts to finally jump, but they mostly should. But we're going to see more of those this coming year. And people will or won't complain depending on which team's making the deal and whether or not they root for that team or hate that team. That seems to be the case because, again, how many deals did we see this year that were three-way trades? And they were made three-way trades for a simple reason. One team wanted to add a player, did not have the cap space to make it work, so they used an intermediary. This is why I call it like money laundering, because it's this complicated way to make sure that you get your player. You're technically supposed to be above the salary cap, but you gave away a draft pick in order to make sure that you're not above the salary cap. And so I don't see one as being necessarily worse than the other, because this team that does the three-way deal has the player in the lineup. This team that has the LTIR doesn't. So Mark Stone wasn't in the lineup for Vegas for quite some time. Whereas, say, I think like Ryan O'Reilly, wasn't that a three-way deal? Toronto had him in the lineup. And there were various others as well, and that would have put them over the cap if not for that third team being involved to take on some of the cap money. Demotion to the AHL is a way to inefficiently get around the salary cap, and there are definitely cases of this as well. So when you demote a player to the minors, it is the league minimum plus, I think it's $350,000 that you get written off of the cap hit. So if you demote a player who's worth $6 million a year to the AHL, this coming season, $1.125 million in cap relief is afforded to your team. Well, it's not nothing. I mean, you can use that $1.125 million to replace that player who maybe just isn't working out with another player. And so you're still getting around the salary cap a little bit here. It's not by a ton. You're not going to be able to add a $10 million contract for that, but it is still a way to kind of get over the cap. And before they had this, back when you could just send the entire contract to the AHL, yeah, that happened. I did the Wade Redden video not too long ago, and that was the thing. General managers would just send a guy to the AHL because there are teams who are perfectly fine with going way over the cap if they have the chance. And then there's the cash signing bonuses. Now, this doesn't get you around the cap, but it is an uneven. It is uneven in terms of your balance, right? I'm looking for the word balance there. But your cash signing bonuses, not all teams can afford to do this. Not all teams can on July 1st say, okay, we got $20 million in signing bonuses to pay out. Some teams can. Toronto can, the Rangers can, Detroit, almost any original six team really can afford to do that. Vancouver can afford to do that. There are teams that can absolutely say, all right, we're going to just, give these guys signing bonus money, because it does two things. First off, it makes that contract more attractive to a player than getting paid out during the year. Getting everything paid on the first day of your contract on July 1st, or getting a majority of it paid that day, absolutely. You can do a lot. You can do a lot more with that money. And there's a lot of ways that you can use to bring down your tax burden and all that fun stuff. Plus, it also has the added bonus with that bonus of making sure your contract's buyout proof. So we're going to see buyouts over the next couple of weeks. We're going to hear about contracts being buyout proof. And it's because the cash signing bonuses cannot be bought out. The salaries can, but the signing bonus cannot. So that's still owed, and it still ends up being part of that cap hit. So signing bonuses aren't a way around the cap, but it means that not all $4 million a year contracts are created equal. Yes, two players might make $4 million a year, but one might get that $3 million up front and then $1 million paid during the year, whereas the other one just gets the $4 million paid during the year. And so it gives that advantage to certain teams. And that's just the reality of it. So is it an even balanced system? No. It's as even and balanced as I think it's going to get. It's definitely more even and balanced than it was before we had a salary cap. And back when you could just demote contracts to the minors and just go out and sign somebody else and just keep spending your money. But it is a setup that I know people get mad about. But it feels like LTIR is the one that everybody just grumbles and gets angry about and wags their finger. Whereas the other ways that teams get around the salary cap doesn't seem to bother them so much. But again, about half the league is in cap trouble right now. Vancouver's over the cap. There's other teams that are right near the cap, do not have the money to sign players. And so I expect us to see a lot of buyouts. There are owners that don't want to sign buyouts because they don't want to spend more and more money to make an issue go away and then have to spend more money to bring another player in. That's where they start asking questions to their general manager of, why do I have to buy out these contracts you signed? What are you doing wrong? So it honestly, that's a question I'd be asking as an owner myself, would be, well, wait a minute, you signed this guy and said he'd be great, and now you want me to spend, $15 million today because it didn't work out, and then you want to spend another $20 million over 5 years on a guy to replace him. I don't know. I think you need to find another way around this. But at any rate, that's where we're at. I do expect LTIR to continue to be the sticking point with fans and with media, but it is not the only way teams are using to get around the salary cap, and it will continue to be the case. And again, LTIR, they do check, and these guys, I have no reason to think that players aren't genuinely hurt. Because we've seen players play through injury, I cannot see a player sitting out for a month, not playing, when he's healthy, just to do his team a favor and get them under the salary cap. I just can't see it. And I think if that was happening, those stories would have come out by now. We would already be hearing, yeah, so this guy's not even hurt. Friends of his or his wife said something on social media. Somebody let it slip. We really haven't seen that. But at any rate, that's where we're at. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.